All right, thanks for tuning in to the OFN meeting room on the Our Lads Football Radio Network as we talk Dallas Cowboys here on the OFN meeting room. And we have our special guest, first time special guest that we're going to talk to in just a second. But we want to remind everybody to order this Our Lads Draft Guide. The Our Lads Draft Guide is available right now at ourlads.com. And this is a great time to get it, especially if you are a Cowboys fan, because as you're about to find out, we have 18. It's incredible. We have 18 players that are actually 17 players in this guide, but 18 players we'll be talking about. That is a lot of player content for just the Dallas Cowboys. So if you're a Cowboy fan, get the Our Lads Draft Guide and you won't forget it or regret it. And also the review guide will be coming out in about a month or so. Not sure this year. I'll have to ask Dan about that because of the OTAs, and of course that kind of put a monkey in the wrench. But bottom line is we have a lot to talk about here on the show, directing our attention to the Cowboys. And we'll do that by welcoming in Katie Drummond, managing editor for Cowboys Wire at usatoday.com. Katie, thanks for talking to us for the first time.
Greg, it's my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on.
Well, tell us, hey, Katie, it's great to have you on. Tell us about your background. How long have you, first of all, you were a Cowboys fan.
Yes.
And okay. And how did you get the job? And tell us a little bit about your experience with Cowboys Wire.
Sure. I've been covering the Cowboys since 2010. I am a diehard fan. That's actually what brought me to writing about football is my fandom for the Cowboys. I started off in, the fan section of an SB Nation blog. I ended up being elevated to a front page writer, eventually a site editor. I worked over for the Scout Network with Mike Fisher, Cowboys Insider. We ran that site together. And then Cowboys Wire was being formed. USA Today reached out to me, snatched me up to run the site to get everything going. And I've been at the helm since its inception in 2016. So it's been a very wild ride. I would say that kind of living the dream for any Cowboys fan that's out there.
Yes.
That I was able to parlay my writing talents into a gig that has formed into now something that I do pretty much all day, every day. If anybody that's in the industry knows, it does not sleep. So we're basically working all the time, and the Cowboys are one of those teams that keeps you going at all times of the night. So it's been a very interesting decade plus for myself.
Do you have any special memories, the most looking back all the years of whether as a fan or covering the team?
Yeah, I mean, it's so many. My first training camp, I was there in 2007 with Bill Parcells, so getting to see the tuna, that was amazing. I was in attendance. I covered the draft at AT&T Stadium a couple years ago. I've interviewed some of the highest profile Cowboys players in history: Roger Staubach, DeMarcus Ware, Emmitt Smith, Jason Witten. Those kind of things that when you're a fan on the sideline, you don't really foresee yourself having those sort of opportunities.
Right.
But I think more so than anything is just the fact that other fans look to me as a guiding voice and somebody that's knowledgeable on the team. Because I developed that as I went along. When I first started, I had so many questions and things that I had to learn about football beyond just what you watch on television, every Sunday.
Yes.
So much beside just what's on the field, not just how plays happen, how players work towards that, but the business aspect of football, from the draft to the salary cap to scouting players and things of that sort. I kind of found my niche when it came to the salary cap and just an overall understanding of how the team functions. That's kind of what I would say my forte is it's just an overview of the Cowboys and understanding the intricacies of how things flow, as opposed to being an X's and O's guy or a guy that can break down, back pedals and keeping your hips loose and things of that sort. I leave that to the professional scouts and those guys that study that trade. But an overall understanding of the team is what I try to bring best to the fans and make sure that they understand that, not everything that you hear in the mainstream media is the actual factual of what's going on with the team. So I try to give them that other perspective.
Absolutely. And it is something when you come into it as a fan, as opposed to say all right, I went to college or I went to this special school, trained me to be a writer, and I went from writing news to sports, and that was my profession, and that's what I did. And I had a paper in college, and a completely different perspective than coming in from the fans from the outside as a fan, like I have and you have, and it is important that you try to do your best to separate those differences between. And I'm not talking about being a homer or being overly critical, but just trying to look at it from the fans' perspective and what it is that they would want to know about the team,
Right.
not over glorify things. I mean, that's the one thing that we hear all the time on the national media. It's just this constant, just barrage of Dallas news when it just doesn't even feel like there should be any. Why are we talking about the Cowboys today? Is there really nothing else going on in the world that we have to bring this topic up again? That kind of thing. And I think it's important for the fans to see that there are a lot of other topics and a lot of other players to talk about that deserve an opportunity to get their story out. And that's why it's great to hear that that's something that's important to you.
Oh yeah, most definitely. When it comes to the Cowboys, Jerry Jones has done a masterful job. There will be probably collegiate courses. They have college courses about Tupac and Michael Jackson music. They'll have a college course on Jerry Jones and his marketing techniques when it's all said and
Can
done.
imagine.
Uh,
Yeah. Wow.
but he's able to keep the Cowboys in the limelight. He loves it. Sometimes it's to the detriment of the overall quality of the team. That is something that we have to admit. But overall, there's a lot of hoopla surrounding America's team. So when you get beyond that, there's still so much content. There's always something dealing with the Cowboys. A lot of the other writers in the USA Today network, they always marvel how I'm able to find so many different things to talk about when it comes to the Cowboys. Part of it is just doing due diligence, but the other part is that they're always producing information that somebody wants to read about. The guys, once you get a star on your helmet, you're a lot more famous
Oh yeah.
nationally, internationally. So people have a tendency to want to flock to those kind of guys. And then when you have a situation like what you saw in the draft a couple weeks ago, where they were able to get CeeDee Lamb, somebody that was sliding in the draft inexplicably compared to where most people thought he was in the pre-draft rankings, when all of that kind of falls into place and you have somebody with their own cachet falling or getting to the Cowboys stratosphere, then it makes for magic, and we're very pleased to be able to bring that to the people.
And speaking of Lamb, uh, that I tell you, I don't know what the Cowboys fans were looking for before the draft. You can let me know what that was, but I mean, before the draft, I felt the Cowboys, it's not the wide receiver position, and with those top three guys, and potentially four, there would be an opportunity to get one of them where the Cowboys were. And I felt myself, even though from the outside perspective, if you're not really doing research and homework, I think outside people are going, well, they've got two really good receivers, including,
Right.
of course, Cooper. They don't really need a third. But if you really looked at it and you looked over what the Cowboys' needs were, and you knew chances were one of those receivers would be there for the Cowboys, and possibly even Jefferson being that fourth, I felt, yeah, you know what? That would be, knowing Jerry, that would be the move, because wouldn't that be an awesome trio of receivers, a dangerous trio to expose opposing defenses and to also do what Jerry wants to do, which is what you talked about, and that's market his team. And how sexy of an offense can you look when you can put out those three receivers every Sunday? It's going to be awesome if you're a Cowboys fan.
There's so much to touch on there. Let's first of all start with the marketing and work backwards from there. Jerry Jones has already convinced CeeDee Lamb to wear number 88. It's an infamous jersey in Cowboys history. It's been
Yeah.
worn by Drew Pearson, Michael Irvin, most recently Des Bryant, and now it's CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee came out after the draft and said he wanted to wear number 10. Jerry wasn't having it. He convinced him. He did his Jerry magic. I assume virtually over Skype or Zoom or whatever the case may be.
Uh-huh.
But he did his Jerry magic in order to get CeeDee Lamb in that number 88 jersey to signify that he is going to be the alpha guy in Dallas for years to come. But beyond that, I think you're exactly right. When the draft process started, people that are in the know, people that understand how the NFL works nowadays, where it's offense over everything, saw that the Cowboys had a need. They lost basically three major free agents this past season, as far as that they weren't able to replace. There was Robert Quinn, the defensive end, led the team in sacks last year. Didn't do much as far as run stopping, and he was kind of a guy that was just always rushing the passer. So, take that with a grain of salt when you talk about the deal that the Bears ended up giving him for what he's going to bring to the table. They lost cornerback Byron Jones. That was kind of the biggest one that had Cowboys Nation split as far as his value. Byron Jones does not get a lot of turnovers, but he does everything else immaculately as a cornerback. He does not give up receptions. I mean, he is as close to lockdown as you're going to see in this passing era of the NFL, as far as not getting targeted very often and not giving up big receptions or big plays. But he doesn't get turnovers. And Mike Nolan, who came in as a new defensive coordinator, that is a mandate for him. They want to play press man coverage, and they want to be able to have turnovers coming from all secondary positions. So they did not want to give Byron Jones that huge contract. So that was a hole Cowboys had to fill. They also lost slot receiver Randall Cobb. And Cobb was kind of the most surprising loss that they had, simply because he had worked previously with Mike McCarthy. They mentioned him as being one of the two receivers. They brought back Amari Cooper. They mentioned publicly that they wanted to bring back Randall Cobb, but Cobb got $9 million a year from the Houston Texans. They weren't going to match that for a number three receiver in Dallas. That was an impossibility. So that opened up the position for a receiver to come into play. Now, we were doing mock drafts all the way back from February, basically almost as soon as the last season ended. The Cowboys ended 8-8. Mock drafts are what we do. Everybody knows they're beautiful when it comes to traffic. Everybody wants to have insight. We use our mock drafts a little differently. We don't try to predict who's going to come to the Cowboys, but we rather use our mock drafts to say, these are players that should be available in certain spots. You should get to know these guys. So we kind of try to have some variety as far as our mocks, not put out the same guys. And inevitably, you end up putting the same guys in mocks repeatedly when you're doing one every week. But for the most part, we just try to expose the fan base. It's our way of introducing them to guys that could possibly come to the Cowboys, and just so they have a better knowledge of who's in the league at the time. Early on, mocks always ended up having an available wide receiver for the Cowboys. And again, you're trying to keep the offense top flight. The Cowboys ascended in 2019. Dak Prescott took the next step, over 4,000 yards, had a beautiful season. You want to kind of keep that going. And even though Michael Gallup is ascending to like a 1B to Amari Cooper's 1A, the idea of getting a third receiver, but everybody thought it was going to be Ruggs. Everybody thought that Lamb and Jerry Jeudy out of Alabama were going to be gone, and Ruggs was going to be kind of the last guy standing among those top three receivers. And bringing that speed element to Dallas would have been a beautiful thing. They don't really have a top flight burner in the offense that, takes the top off the defense. But he obviously went first. I don't know how well the Cowboys were considering him, but when Lamb was there, it was a no-brainer. He's an alpha receiver. To me, his closest comparison is DeAndre Hopkins as far as what he does with the ball in his hands, being difficult to bring down. If you look at his tape, the way that he blocks downfield, which is so important for the Cowboys offense when it focuses on Ezekiel Elliott, having receivers that block downfield. And I don't just mean, you kind of get in somebody's way and you interrupt him. He is a dog when it comes to blocking. He loves it. I've seen him lay out guys, when it comes to blocking downfield. So adding him to the offense, not just what he can do with the ball in his hand, his catch radius. He showed the ability to get deep last season when he was catching passes from Jalen Hurts. All around, what he brings to the Cowboys offense is just it's an incredible formula, and it gives Dallas options. They signed Amari Cooper to a 5-year deal for $100 million, but there's an out. It's basically a 2-year deal with 3 one-year team options. After 2021, they can walk away with very little dead cap money. It's like $6 million that can be split between 2022 and 2023. Michael Gallup opposite him is going to be a free agent in 2021, after 2021. So they basically have 2 years of this three-headed monster at receiver, and then they're going to pick. Do we keep Amari, let Gallup go in free agency, get the compensatory pick, or do we go ahead and jettison Amari, give Gallup the new contract, and then we have another couple years of him and Lamb being the top two? So Dallas has not only set themselves up for the next 2 years of having an incredible offense, they also are looking long-term into the future when it comes to the financial parameters around how they want to structure this team.
And by the way, regarding the salary cap, it's great that you have dedicated so much time to it, because it is such an important part in the NFL. But it does take a lot of time before you feel like you've got the expertise to talk about it. Is it Dallas, or are you also able to use your cap expertise with other teams in the league in general?
Well, I spent a year covering the Saints. I spent a year covering the Redskins, as well as the Cowboys. So I have a bit of familiarity with them for the years that I covered them. Overall, my focus is always going to be on the Cowboys. That's what I dive into.
Well, let me put it this way: if let's say I say to you, "Hey, do you know about this contract with this player?" and you were able to do research on that contract for a couple of minutes just by looking at it, would you be able to have a pretty good idea of the ins and outs of that contract just by taking a look at it for a couple of minutes, even if you had no idea what the player's contract was before you looked at it?
Yeah, I would use one of the multiple resources, overthecap.com. I will plug Jason's site all the time. It is the Bible when it comes to salary cap notes and being on top of things for
Yep.
other teams. So, I keep my own spreadsheet when it comes to the Cowboys. Much of the information that I get on the league and the Cowboys in general, I confirm with what he has on Over the Cap.
Yeah.
NFL PA has their own daily update as far as the overall team salary cap picture. So you kind of do your checks and balances against that. But yeah, if you were to give me a guy and we were going to talk about their salary, I would look at it and I would say, yeah, I can easily tell when they're going to be able to escape from his contract. If I had the overview of the team, how he fits in with the general scheme and what they would be looking at as far as replacements. A lot of
Great.
it has to do with the team. The team management. That's one of the big things. You have your coaching staff that's in charge of developing players, but your front office and their cap management is paramount to success in the NFL these
Oh
days.
yeah.
Having the right mixture, I should say,
Sure.
of offense versus defense balance. Dallas is skewed heavily towards the offense as far as how they pay. You saw that come to fruition in the draft. They drafted a lot of defensive guys because they're locked in with their offensive players, and they kind of need to keep shuffling the defensive guys and have young talent that's on rookie contracts. I call it retail talent at wholesale prices. That's really the modus operandi that you want to have. You want to have guys that are playing on that 4 year/5 year option rookie contract that are contributing at the same level as veterans, but for the cheaper price,
Oh yeah.
so that you can keep paying the superstar guys that you have on your roster.
That's
And I
right.
think Dallas has done a pretty good job of doing that. They were famous for being in quote unquote salary cap hell. I tried to dispel that myth as much as possible. When it comes to the salary cap and allocation, restructure of contracts and all that deals, teams can do whatever they want. There's really no salary cap for the NFL. It's the guys that the owners have put together in order to control the cost of the player. If they want to sign a guy, they can restructure another guy's contract to make room for a guy. And as
True.
long as they're doing it wisely and not doing it on players that they're going to end up releasing and
Yeah.
funneling dead money on the cap, it's a wise strategy. And even when they do that, this is one of the things that I think people have the hardest time understanding. Even when you restructure a guy and end up having dead money on the cap, if I'm paying player X $10 million now and the salary cap is $200 million, that's a certain percentage of the cap. If I push that off into the future, if I restructure and push that $8 million off into the future, the salary cap is going up.
Yep.
So that $8 million is actually taking up a lower percentage of future caps than it's taking up in the year that you're actually paying the guy.
Sure.
So even when you're pushing money into the future, you're actually doing yourself a service
Yep.
by giving yourself more bang for your buck in the current year and taking less space of your future salary caps.
Yep.
So there's a lot of stuff that people don't understand, and Cowboys were in that dance for a while. The problem was the Cowboys didn't have good enough players. If they had all that dead money on the cap, but they still had good enough players on their teams, they would have won. It wasn't that difficult for them to find other guys. But at some point, yes, there's a limit of how much you can spend and who you can bring in. But by and large, for the most part, teams can do what they want if they feel the player is worth it.
Yeah, and that's why the draft process is so important, and you
Yes.
just can't win over the long haul without drafting well. Couple of quick things, and then we'll move on. One, it's like when we were getting the news about Aaron Rodgers. I thought it was kind of funny when I think some analysts weren't doing any homework when they were saying, "Oh, Aaron Rodgers is going to get traded. Oh, where's Aaron Rodgers going to go?" And it's like, can you look at his contract before you start saying things like that? Aaron Rodgers can't go anywhere. But like you said, sure, I guess there's a way to where they could fit it, but they're going to eat so much money, it just doesn't make any sense. So when you hear knowing contracts the way that you do, and I got to imagine, of course, you've got an idea of what Aaron's contract is like because he is that type
Right.
of player that you don't need anybody's nudge to take a look. Does he pretty? I mean, doesn't it logically look like he needs to be in Green Bay for at least 2 more years?
Yeah. Well,
I
They
mean, that's a
can
lot of
trade him.
money. If isn't it like 20 or 25 million if that the team would lose if they let him go after this year?
Well, if they let him go going into this year, yes, they would lose. They would have to accelerate about $30 million, just under $30 million, onto the 2020 cap. There is wiggle room, though. There is actually wiggle room. So the people that are saying they might keep him for a year and then look to trade him, it's not inconceivable that that could happen, because although that he would have a lot of dead money accelerate onto the cap, the amount of cap space that he already has. Basically earmarked for the 2021 season is tremendous. So he would have about $31 million of dead money on the cap, but their cap savings from releasing him, they would actually end up saving about $4.5 million compared to how much money is actually on the cap for him in 2021. He has a base salary of just under $15 million. His prorated signing bonus from all of the restructures and the bonuses and everything he has is about $14 million. He has
Got
about
it.
$7 million in roster bonuses.
Okay.
So the roster bonus and the base salary actually go away.
Got it.
So the $7 million of roster bonus goes away if they release him early in the year, or they trade him,
Okay.
before whatever it is, a fifth day of the league year. The base salary goes to the new team, so you're already looking at $22 million that is leaving the cap. But then his prorated signing bonus that's on 2022 and 2023, which is about $16-17 million, that gets added on to the cap for
Okay.
2021, acceleration of the 2021 year. So that's how you end up with having $31 million of dead money that's on your cap for a player that's not there,
Okay.
but he's already on the books for $36 million on their cap hit next season.
Yeah.
So there actually would be some savings there as far as the cap goes. But again, all that money that they've actually paid him already,
Yeah.
that
It's
would be going down the
not
drain.
going to happen.
Right.
And Jordan Love's not ready anyway.
Of course. Yeah.
Lastly, Prescott, just what's your gut tell you how it's going to work out?
Well, last February, March, I was constantly derided. I wrote an article that says Dak Prescott is about to be the first $200 million man in the NFL. I said the Cowboys need to sign him for 7 years at $29 million. At the time, most people that were even doing predictions of contracts were saying Dak should get around 23, 24 million. You saw a handful of people say 26 million. Nobody was talking 29 million at the time. And now look, it would have been a bargain. If they had paid him $29 million last year in
Yep.
February, it would have been a bargain.
Sure.
The Cowboys screwed up. They waited until Carson Wentz and Jared Goff got their contracts. Other guys that were in the league already re-upped, and now the high contract of $35 million for Russell Wilson. And after the season Dak Prescott had in 2019, it's hard to say that you shouldn't pay him the going rate. He definitely needs to make as much as Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, two guys that were in his draft class that he's outplayed, and guys that were already paid based on their draft slot. Remember, Dak Prescott, we're not just talking about a guy that was a first round pick and is looking for his new contract. He was a fourth round compensatory pick.
Yeah.
The man's made like $7 million.
Yeah.
Goff and Wentz already have made $30-40 million before they signed their new contracts last year, which are already $30 million in. So you're talking about a guy who's outplaying the guys in his class, and he's probably has 10% of how much they've made so far in his career. Of course, a man wants to get paid.
Yes.
Of course, he's going to hold out.
Sure.
That's only right. I mean, it's inconceivable to think anything else. So right now, the word is that it's about gears. I think that's a bit of a fallacy when people say it's only about the years. Dak Prescott and the Cowboys are generally in agreement that it's going to be between $33 and $35 million a year.
Okay.
The issue is that Dak Prescott wants to get back on the market as soon as possible because the new TV deals are coming. I wrote an article about how when the NBA signed their TV deal last decade, the salaries ballooned. I mean, you have NBA players that you never heard of making $30 million a year. I mean, there's guys making $40-50 million a year because of how much money is in that TV deal. And the NFL is far more popular than the NBA. When you look at the ratings every year, the top games watched, the top TV shows watched, are almost all NFL games. There's so much money that's about to be flooded, coronavirus withstanding. But there's so much money that's going to be flooded into the markets when it comes to these TV contracts that Dak Prescott and his agent Todd France know that there is going to be a huge spike in the salary cap when all is said and done.
Okay.
So you're looking at 2023, 2024, and he wants to be back on the market at that time. The Cowboys, of course, they only do deals that are 5 years or longer. They hate doing anything less than that.
Okay.
For one, because they like to front load a contract with signing bonus. And when you can, under the CBA, when you front load a contract with a signing bonus, it allocates over 5 5 years evenly. So if I give a guy a $50 million signing bonus, it hits the salary cap each of the next 5 years, 10 million, 10 million, 10 million, 10 million, 10 million,
Okay.
as opposed to all being up front. That's how they like to do the majority of their contracts so that they can keep the first year and oftentimes the second year cap hit low to allow them to afford other guys. If Dak Prescott is only under a 3 or 4 year deal, they really can't do it that way, and that handcuffs them as far as their overall team strategy of building the roster. So he wants to be in town for he wants 3. He will settle for 4. The Cowboys would love 6. They'll settle for 5, and now they're in the middle. Dak Prescott would take 5 years, but if you're going to add a 5th year, you have to do it at the salary that he thinks he's going to get once the TV contracts hit and he would be on the open market again. Okay. So you can't say $35 million over 5 years if he knows that in 4 years, the going salary is going to be $45 million for quarterbacks. You know, it doesn't make sense for him to sign that deal. So where you say it's about years, it's also about the money over those years.
And
that feeling, July 15th, they sign a contract. It doesn't make sense for either side to go past that deadline. I have to believe that it's going to get done, but I'm more nervous than most. I will say that. A lot of people just assume it's going to get done. I'm more nervous than most because at this point, what is the reason for either side to move outside of that deadline? Dak knows what he's worth. He knows that if he goes into next year under the franchise tag, even if he plays poorly, he still has enough of a resume to demand being paid as one of the top players in the league. And the Cowboys, if he plays poorly, will then have a bit of caution as far as what they want to do. So that's where my fear comes from, the divorce, is that if they don't sign a long-term contract before the deadline, what happens next year, regardless of, not regardless, but in either direction of how he plays, there's going to be a lot of stuff still left on the table if they don't agree to something by July 15th.
Yeah, the only thing I could think about would be just injury. Would be if Dak Prescott doesn't want to take the chance that he gets hurt. That's it.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. That's a good point. He's played 64 out of 64 games.
Yeah.
He did have a hand injury last year, and he did have a shoulder injury that kind of cost the Cowboys out of the playoffs. A lot of the people that don't like him point to the lackluster offensive performance against the Eagles in the next to last week of the season. He was playing with a bad shoulder.
Oh,
he didn't practice all week.
He shouldn't have even been playing.
Exactly, but they didn't have a backup solution. They didn't have anybody they trusted. They do now. They have Andy Dalton, that they signed recently, but they didn't trust Cooper Rush to go out there and win a game against Philadelphia. That would be ridiculous to assume that. Sure. So he went out there and he gutted it out. But all in all, he's a warrior. He takes the hit. We've seen him take the hits. He plays every week. So you got to run that man his money.
KD, I don't usually, this is the first time I've had to do this in a while, but I have to ask you, is there any way either in 2 minutes or next week or tomorrow that we can do a part 2? Because we have just spent so much time, good time, on that. I just got to believe we're going to be running so far out of bounds of where I want the length of this show to be. So I'm going to leave it up to you. We could stop the recording, restart it. We'll have 2 parts today, or we can have you on again in a few days or next week.
We can keep going today. I mean, we can definitely divide it up into 2 parts if
let's
you
do
want.
That.
But yeah,
let's do that. All right. So we're going to be back with KD because everybody's not listening live anyway. You're watching, listening on demand. So we're going to leave you right now, and we're going to come back, and you're going to see right next to our first show here that we're going to post, we're going to have a part 2. So we'll be back in just a minute, but we just love the power of being able to be on demand instead of listening to the radio or television and commercials and all sorts of stuff. So KD, we'll be right back.